The conference hall fell silent the moment the security guard reached for the single father's shoulder. Hundreds of employees watched as a sharply dressed CEO smiled with quiet contempt, convinced the tired man in faded work boots had wandered into the wrong corporate event. He stood there holding nothing more than a worn leather notebook and a lunch bag packed for his little daughter. A few people laughed when the CEO remarked that the company had no use for spectators pretending to belong among innovators. Then, before anyone could escort him away, the company's celebrated lead engineer rushed through the doors, stopped in disbelief, and with unmistakable respect addressed the humiliated stranger by the only title that instantly erased every smile in the room. Professor. If you believe kindness can change lives, forgiveness is stronger than pride, hope deserves another chance, and every person deserves respect before judgment, please take a moment to like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so you can become part of our growing family and never miss another inspiring story. Graham Mercer had never cared much about appearances. The wrinkles in his shirt came from waking before sunrise to prepare breakfast for his 9-year-old daughter, Clara, before walking her to school. The faded boots carried the marks of countless repair jobs because after losing his university position years earlier, he accepted whatever honest work could keep food on the table. During the day he repaired industrial equipment, fixed broken machinery for small businesses, and occasionally worked construction sites. Every dollar mattered because Clara had dreams bigger than either of them could afford. She wanted to become an engineer, just as her father once had been before life rewrote every chapter of his future. Few people knew that decades earlier Graham had been considered one of the brightest engineering educators in Europe. His research on sustainable manufacturing systems had quietly influenced an entire generation of engineers. He cared little for fame and preferred teaching students who struggled rather than chasing prestigious awards. Many of his former students eventually built remarkable careers, but Graham remained happiest inside classrooms where curiosity mattered more than recognition. Everything changed when his wife passed away unexpectedly after a sudden illness. Grief shattered his focus, medical bills emptied every savings account, and caring for his young daughter became his only priority. Unable to balance full-time teaching with endless responsibilities at home, he resigned without making a public announcement. Years passed, memories faded, and the academic world slowly moved on while Graham simply became another hard-working single father trying to survive. Across the city, Verity Caldwell had built Caldwell Dynamics into one of the fastest-growing technology firms in the country. Brilliant, disciplined, and relentlessly ambitious, she believed success came from efficiency above all else. Her employees admired her intelligence but feared her cold perfectionism. She judged competence almost instantly by confidence, appearance, and presentation. It had become a habit she barely noticed. To Verity, polished shoes suggested discipline, expensive suits reflected commitment, and hesitation signaled weakness. She had forgotten that life's greatest teachers rarely announced themselves through appearances. The company was hosting an innovation summit that afternoon to celebrate a revolutionary manufacturing system designed by its engineering division. Investors, journalists, and executives filled the bright conference hall. The event represented years of work and millions of dollars in investment. The lead engineer, Rowan Ellsworth, had personally invited someone very important, but a delayed train left him running behind schedule. Meanwhile, Graham arrived carrying Rowan's invitation tucked carefully inside his notebook. Clara had reminded him 3 times that morning not to lose it because she knew how much meeting Rowan meant to her father. When Graham entered the reception area, several guests looked at him with quiet confusion. His clothes were clean but clearly worn. The receptionist searched for his name but became distracted by the arrival of investors. Before she could finish checking the guest list, Verity happened to pass by. Already under pressure before delivering her keynote presentation, she noticed Graham standing alone with his lunch bag and assumed he had entered through the wrong entrance. Without asking questions, she addressed him loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. She remarked that maintenance workers should use the service entrance and suggested that important corporate events were reserved for invited professionals. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the room. Graham tried explaining that he carried an invitation, but nervousness caused him to fumble through the notebook while several people impatiently watched. Verity interpreted his hesitation as confirmation that he did not belong. Years of hardship had taught Graham to endure embarrassment quietly. He lowered his eyes, not because he accepted her judgment but because he had promised Clara never to answer humiliation with anger. Every difficult day since losing his wife had strengthened his patience. He simply waited, hoping someone would allow him to explain. At that exact moment, Rowan Ellsworth hurried through the entrance carrying presentation files under one arm. His eyes swept across the room before freezing on the familiar face standing beside the security guard. For a heartbeat he seemed unable to believe what he was seeing. Then he crossed the crowded lobby almost at a run. The entire room expected him to greet the CEO first. Instead, Rowan stopped directly before Graham, his expression transformed into pure gratitude. He gently shook Graham's hand with both of his own and called him Professor Mercer. The title echoed across the silent lobby. Every conversation stopped, even the photographers lowered their cameras. Verity stared in confusion as Rowan introduced Graham not merely as a former lecturer but as the mentor responsible for shaping nearly every engineer leading the company's breakthrough research. Rowan explained that whenever people praised his innovations, they were unknowingly praising lessons Graham had taught decades earlier. The manufacturing system investors admired had its foundations in notebooks Graham had shared freely with students long before similar ideas became fashionable. The atmosphere shifted so completely that it almost felt unreal. Employees who had laughed moments earlier now looked at Graham with stunned respect. Verity felt her confidence disappear beneath an overwhelming wave of embarrassment. For the first time in many years, she realized she had measured a human being entirely by clothing and circumstance. Rowan insisted that Graham join the executive panel on stage. Graham politely refused. Recognition had never interested him. He had come simply because Rowan wanted Clara to see that her father's work had mattered. Only then did Graham mention that his daughter believed engineers could change the world through kindness as much as intelligence. His words carried no bitterness, only quiet sincerity. Those simple sentences affected many listeners more deeply than the polished keynote speeches prepared for the event. As presentations began, Rowan repeatedly acknowledged ideas first introduced by Graham during university seminars years earlier. Archived lecture notes appeared on the giant screen beside modern engineering diagrams, revealing how Graham's forgotten research had inspired today's celebrated innovations. Older professors attending the summit gradually recognized his name and remembered the humble educator who always stayed late helping struggling students while others rushed home. Verity watched every revelation with growing regret. She had spent years building a culture celebrating excellence yet had personally failed its most basic principle, respecting people before judging them. During the lunch break, she quietly approached Graham. There were no cameras nearby. No investors watching, only sunlight streaming through enormous windows. For the first time in years, Verity struggled to find words. She admitted that success had made her believe appearances revealed character. She confessed she had forgotten how invisible hardship could be. She apologized not because public relations required it but because her conscience finally demanded it. Graham listened patiently. He understood mistakes. Life had given him enough reasons to recognize that good people sometimes lose perspective without realizing it. Instead of reminding her how publicly she had embarrassed him, he spoke about the importance of teaching children that dignity should never depend upon income or appearance. He explained how Clara often asked why some adults treated poor people differently. He never wanted her to believe compassion belonged only to those with comfortable lives. His forgiveness arrived quietly, without conditions or speeches. It humbled Verity more than anger ever could. That afternoon, Rowan invited Graham to tour the engineering laboratories. Young engineers gathered around eagerly, asking questions about concepts they had only read about in old journals. Graham answered every question with warmth, encouraging curiosity instead of showing off expertise. He praised ideas before correcting mistakes. He listened longer than he spoke. Employees noticed something remarkable. People left conversations with Graham believing more deeply in themselves. His greatest talent had never been engineering. It had always been inspiring others to discover their own potential. Later that day Clara arrived after school, carrying a handmade science project she wanted to surprise her father with. She nervously entered the company lobby, expecting to find him waiting alone. Instead she found hundreds of employees applauding. When Graham saw her, his entire face softened. nothing mattered more than that little girl. Rowan knelt beside Clara and told her that the company's greatest teacher was also her father. She looked at Graham with tear-filled eyes. She had always believed he was extraordinary, now the world seemed to agree. Verity watched father and daughter embrace. She noticed Clara's carefully repaired backpack, her neatly patched sweater, and the pride shining brighter than any expensive possession. In that embrace she saw everything success had failed to teach her. Real wealth was measured by love, integrity, sacrifice, and the people whose lives became better because someone believed in them. Several weeks later, Verity announced a company-wide initiative requiring every executive to spend time mentoring students from disadvantaged communities. She also established scholarships named not after famous investors or wealthy founders but after educators whose influence had transformed lives without seeking recognition. The first scholarship carried Graham Mercer's name, though he initially resisted the honor until he learned it would help single parents continue their education while raising children. Graham eventually accepted one additional role. Once each month he visited Caldwell Dynamics to mentor young engineers. He refused a large salary, requesting instead that the money fund children's science programs in struggling neighborhoods. His request inspired dozens of employees to volunteer their own time. The culture inside the company slowly changed, performance remained important, compassion became equally valuable. Months passed, and the company grew stronger than ever. Investors noticed higher innovation, employees reported greater job satisfaction, turnover declined dramatically. People worked harder not because they feared failure but because they felt respected. Verity often reflected on the afternoon she almost removed the very man whose wisdom had quietly shaped her company's greatest achievements. She kept Graham's old leather notebook, which he later donated to the Scholarship Foundation, displayed in a glass case near the entrance. Beside it stood a simple inscription reminding every visitor that true greatness rarely announces itself through appearances, titles, or wealth. It reveals itself through humility, service, and the lives lifted along the way. Years later, Clara stood on another stage wearing an engineering graduation gown. She spoke about the single father who never allowed disappointment to become bitterness, who fixed broken machines by day and repaired broken confidence by simply believing in people. She thanked the woman who had once misjudged him but found the courage to change. She thanked the student who never forgot his teacher. Most of all, she thanked every ordinary person whose quiet acts of kindness never appear in headlines yet change generations forever. The audience rose together, not because they witnessed the success of an engineer, but because they recognized the lasting power of humility over pride, forgiveness over resentment, and compassion over appearance. Graham sat quietly in the front row with tears of gratitude filling his eyes. His greatest achievement had never been the ideas recorded in textbooks or the inventions inspired by his research. It was raising a daughter who carried kindness into every room she entered and proving that character always outlives reputation. Before this story ends, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing a moment when someone looked beyond appearances and changed a life, or tell us what lesson touched your heart the most. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that every stranger you meet may be carrying invisible burdens, hidden sacrifices, and remarkable wisdom. A little kindness costs nothing, but it can restore someone's dignity, rewrite someone's future, and remind the world that the greatest people are often the ones who never ask to be noticed.